Welcome, everybody. It's your favorite business coach, Frank Harita here, and we have another awesome episode. We have a special guest today, Amy Terry, and why don't we get right into it, Amy? So why don't you tell everybody who's not familiar with who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. I always ask everybody, tell us about your early years, tell us about you, how you grew up, and then it'll be interesting to have the conversation today. I know we're going to go the real estate route, so but I think there'll be a lot of benefit for everybody. So just tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I work out of the southwest suburbs of Denver, which is also where I grew up. I'm actually sixth generation Coloradan. My dad's family founded Longmont here in Colorado. So we've been here forever. My parents both had their real estate license growing up, but that wasn't their career. My mom was a teacher and my dad worked for Disabled American Veterans, but they did flip houses and I just kind of grew up around it. And then got my first job in high school answering phones at Remax. It was back when you had to call to schedule showings, but really had no desire to go into real estate whatsoever. Went and finished my undergrad in criminology, was planning to head to law school, had worked in real estate during my undergrad just to pay the bills. And when I got accepted to law school, I just kind of panicked that I wasn't sure if it was the right move. So I went to my boss that I was working for at the time and really respected him. And he suggested that I did a year deferment, get my license. He needed the help. And that was, 19 years ago this summer.
Wow.
So graduated in May of 2005, got my license in July of 2005. And it's just kind of taken off from there. And since then, I've kind of dabbled in all things real estate. I've bought and held. I have short-term, long-term rentals. I've flipped. I've subdivided land. I've built from the ground up. I've done a couple development projects. I'm a partner in our real estate brokerage. So I wear the ownership hat of the brokerage overall. And then I manage a team here in Littleton of 14 agents and then still sell myself. So kind of all over the place.
So I think you should find some more things to do.
I know, right? I think I need more on my plate.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you and I have some similarities there in our past. I've done a lot of those as well in the real estate space. What I'm always intrigued at is, tell me more about your parents. So what was it like growing up? It sounds like they had other jobs, but they had their real estate license. So I'm curious to understand why they had their real estate license. They clearly saw there was value in it. Did they themselves invest in real estate while they had their other jobs, or no, they just got them and then never used them?
It's a combo. So my parents have a really cool story. They've kind of had a billion careers together. So for a short time in the early 80s, they both had their license and were actually practicing. And my dad was actually specifically working with bars and restaurants.
Okay.
And my parents had owned bars and restaurants, and my mom was working more residential. Then when the interest rate shot up so much, the real estate market just kind of died. And so my mom started teaching full time and my dad worked with Disabled American Veterans. And that's both what they did for the next 25 years until they fully retired. They flipped houses, but they didn't buy and hold. And so that was when I bought my first place right out of college at 22. They really encouraged me. They're like, keep everything that you can. They're like, if we had just kept one property we bought in our 20s, we'd be in such great shape. So they always owned their primary, but they flipped a lot. And I think they were kind of more into the the instant gratification. Yes. Well, they were into the instant gratification of the flipping. But they were really encouraging me to buy and hold, that they saw, at that point in their early 60s, that made way more sense for the long-term wealth.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that also helped. I wasn't, they really encouraged me to buy as soon as I could. And back then it was, stated income. I'd been in real estate maybe 3 months and did a stated income loan, bought a little short sale. My dad helped me fix up. And then a good friend from college moved in and rented the spare bedroom. And, at the end of the day, she was paying more a month than I was to own it. And from then on, I just was kind of hooked in the power of real estate and the wealth that it can create.
There's a lot of lessons in that. So, when I hear that story, I have an 8-year-old and I think about, my wife and I are a real estate team and we invest as well. And I hope that he sees and learns and gets his real estate license when he's 16. And, you have all these thoughts of what you hope happens, whether it will, I don't know. But
Yeah.
so I'm curious to know how big of an impact it had on you, because, my parents, that was not their thing. Like, they didn't do any of that. And so I wonder what that would have changed for me if they did, not that I had a great childhood. I'm just saying, like, in general for real estate,
Yeah.
because I ended up in that field. So did that change things for you? And did you learn from that?
Yeah, I don't know that so much that they were specifically in real estate, but they were very much risk takers
Okay.
and entrepreneurs, and always ready to jump on an opportunity and go for it. And, I've had conversations with them now, and my mom's like, we've lost a lot of money, we've made a lot of money, but the most important thing is we had so much fun along the way. And so I
Love
think
that.
they took a lot of fear out of it for me. It gave me a really strong foundation of, like, even if you try and fail, you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely think that, I didn't grow up with the mentality of, like, you got to have a safe 9 to 5. They're like, follow your passion and do what you're excited about and kind of trust that things will work out. So in that sense, I think it really helped me be willing to just jump into things in my 20s. And honestly, looking back, I think about people getting into real estate in their 40s. It seems much scarier to go to a, like, eat what you kill business. But at 22, I didn't need to make much. Luckily, it, panned out well. I mean, there was a lot of hard work in that, but yeah. So I don't know so much that they were in real estate, but I think that they were always encouraged me to just go for it. And if you fail, you'll figure it out. And I've always kind of lived that way.
I think that's interesting, because I find that that's a necessary quality to be able to do what we do, what you and I do. Any entrepreneur, right? And investing in real estate. And a lot of times it's just, you got to take action. You're never going to be perfect at it until you start doing the thing.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. So I think that is important, that you saw that and you had that outlook. And I love their outlook.
Yeah. And I think there's also, that's what's kind of cool about my office. I think that we have so many different personalities and so many different passions. And for being in real estate and being an investor, I'm not a huge spreadsheet numbers gal. Like, I've done almost everything off of an educated gut feeling. I really follow my intuition with opportunities. And sometimes the numbers make sense and it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes the numbers are awful, but I just know it's going to be a good buy. So for me, that's also, I've just always kind of trusted my gut, whether all the other factors make sense or not.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So tell me about, let's talk a little bit about real estate as far as, like, what you've done. So you've done a lot. I've done a lot. And I've now, I'll do multiple sectors of real estate as far as investing, but there's one that's my favorite. And so I'm just curious where you stand, and are you going to continue to do multiple facets, or are you just going to do, like, is there one or two that are your favorite, and why? And is that a goal, or no, you want to keep doing both, investing and having the brokerage?
Yeah. Gosh,
a lot of questions,
a really great
there,
question. And layered.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say my favorite for building wealth is just straightforward buying a single family home and holding.
Okay.
I think that is, you cannot go wrong. So that's my favorite. And that's where I really steer clients that are looking to build a rental portfolio and want to build long-term wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, that's my favorite. My favorite as far as, like, passion project, I really, really love doing, like, infill development. I love finding a lot, finding a property. I love the design process. I love working with the architects. I love picking all the finishes. I love being on a construction site. But those are super risky. I've done a couple that were really profitable. I've done some that we've lost money. So that I'm torn. Like, if there was, like, a guaranteed with development, I probably would choose to do that every day. That is what I love the most. But as far as an investment strategy, I think just simple buying and holding is the best. And then as far as, I go back and forth. July will be 19 years. I started selling real estate. There's a part of me that feels burnout on it, honestly. And then there's a part of me that still really loves working with clients. And I absolutely love mentoring agents. I think if I hadn't started managing and mentoring, I would have been burnt out in this career a long time ago. So I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. I mean, I will say this is the first year I met with my financial advisor and was like, because he's always been like, what's your goal date to retire? And we said, oh, I'm just going to work forever. But this is the first year that I was like, okay, well, let's just hypothetically, like, how soon could I retire if I wanted to? So I just turned 41 and I am kind of starting now to think, okay, what strategies do I need to do in the next 5 to 10 years so that I really don't have to work? And honestly, right now, if I really wanted to change my lifestyle, I could stop working. But I'm also like, what would you do all day?
Sure.
So I don't know. That's a hard question for me to answer. I think right now I still kind of enjoy having 10 balls in the air.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you what will be the first thing to kind of drop away.
Yeah. It's interesting. I also like new development. There's so many different ways to do it, obviously. Single family seems to be your tried and true. Do you follow any methods or any processes? For example, I know a lot of people that do single family when they buy and hold, and their main goal is just stay below the median price in the country, right? And that way that the stuff that's small has only so much room it can fall, and the stuff that's big can take a big hit, right? So it's kind of that methodology. So I was just curious if you use any of those,
not necessarily. I'm more just like, I'm always prepared for a good opportunity when it comes up. All of my long-term rentals are in the Denver metro, and I don't think I'm being overly confident that the Denver market is just so stable. There's so much demand here. There always has been demand, but especially post-COVID, we have such a lack of inventory. I don't stress about the market here going down. I think worst case, we'd look at a flat market, which if you're buying to hold, that doesn't really matter. So yeah, I don't have any specific formulas. I just have cash ready that if a good opportunity presents itself. And honestly, a couple of my rentals are properties that I had clients that they needed to get out of it. And it was a good fit. And we had a good conversation that they understood, the pros and cons of going this way and if it makes sense for them or not. So I think for me, it's more about just being ready to jump on an opportunity when it presents itself than having sort of a perfect formula.
Yeah. Gotcha. So what are your thoughts on investing outside your market?
I don't love it. Part of me wants to diversify. I have one short-term rental in Scottsdale, which is actually probably my most profitable rental right now. And I bought that honestly, like I want a retirement home there eventually. So that was kind of a self-serving. I bought a property with that in mind and thought, well, if it breaks even, that would be great. And it's done really, really well. I will say my control freakness comes out, like having another agent handle the transaction, working out of state. We actually have a really unique program within our brokerage. Our brokerage is something I'm just so proud of. And our mission is trying to fix the brokens in real estate. And one of those is that there's not really retirement for agents. So we have one of our former managing brokers started a program called Wealth Builder. And it took him, probably 18 months to figure out all the legalities. But it's basically a group fund where we buy rental properties as a group. So he's the one that now is doing research nationwide of markets that they're predicting appreciation, that we're expecting a lot of cash flow. So I do invest in that as well. And the plan with those, it's a 20-year projection. So we pay them off in 10 years, have cash flow for 10 years. And then at the end of the 20, we can either cash out or you can make decisions in the fund if you want to stay in the fund and buy from other people. But it's a really unique opportunity for agents that want to invest, but maybe don't have 20% down. It's a $5,000 minimum to contribute to that. But that makes me feel like I'm diversified a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I haven't done a lot outside of our markets, but I will tell you, buying now in the Denver metro, it's almost impossible to cash flow, maybe even break even. So I was just talking to a colleague actually this week that she's looking at 1031ing some of her Denver properties into properties in Oklahoma for that reason. It's just cash flowing way better.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. We do a lot of short-term rental, And I find that the appeal is obviously the cash flow, right? It's like long-term versus short-term, but it's steady. It's more steady when you're doing a lot of the long-term stuff.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So I'm sure there's a big not a discrepancy, but a big difference between what you have in the Arizona property versus the Colorado long-term.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny the Scottsdale one's the only one I manage because short-term management is so much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I've brought in help this year, which has been great. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I'm looking at. I would like to also have a place in the mountains. So the hard thing is in the resort towns in Colorado, they put so many restrictions on short-term rentals. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to find the right place that makes sense for that. But yeah, the idea is I would obviously love to spend summers here in the mountains and winters in Arizona eventually.
Sure.
So just kind of setting myself up for long term.
Love it. So let's talk about the brokerage a little bit. So entrepreneurship. I mean, you've got a lot going on. You're investing, you're running a brokerage. How many agents do you have at your brokerage? What's the most difficult thing about having the brokerage right now?
So we have, I think the last count, we were at 180 agents statewide. So we're only based in Colorado. The 8Z comes from every zip code in Colorado, starts with the number 8. We started in 2009 and we've been a pretty slow growing. We're all about quality over quantity. We require everyone as a full-time agent. We require at least a 10 deal minimum a year. So the standards are high. I think we provide a lot of value. We try to kind of be the Nordstrom of brokerages, but we also have a lot of accountability and high expectations for our agents. So it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants that much accountability. I would say really the most difficult thing, which I don't even know if I think the unknown of the NAR settlement and how that's going to play out. But we've honestly been preparing our agents for this since October. So really there wasn't a lot of panic. And we've really honestly been preparing our agents, and I think it's a really great opportunity for us to gain market share. I think agents that don't have support and education and a process, it's going to hurt their business. And I think it offers more opportunity for us. And I do think a lot of agents will transition out of the business. So I think that's probably the hardest thing we're facing now is just navigating that. And now there's still like so many unknowns. Like it's coming in August. We're not exactly sure how the MLS is going to look. The nice thing is Colorado was ahead of the curve. We've always required, well, we wouldn't say always. I think since 2001, we've required buyer's agencies. So that wasn't new to us. But yeah, I feel like we've really tackled that with a lot of education and training. And now it's kind of sitting back to see how it's all going to shake out and just sort of calming fears. We also have an in-house mortgage company, and I was talking to our director of lending, and he was like, well, do you remember when CDAs had to go out 3 days before closing? And, all of a sudden closings, it just was a cluster for like 6 months. And then the dust settled and we all just went on with our careers. And at the end of the day, honestly, it made things kind of better. I remember the days of like the morning of a closing, like, are we closing or are we not closing?
Yep.
Like, at least now we know. So that's kind of how I've been preparing my agents, and what I'm expecting is that it's going to be confusing. We're going to have to work out some kinks for a while, but I think ultimately not a ton is going to change.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the training is a big part of it. I find that those who are willing to lean in are going to be just fine, and it will thin the herd. And I think that's kind of necessary anyway. But I find that the ones that are the most successful are doing what you're doing, which is leaning in. Let's train. Let's face this. Let's get into it, and then let's figure it out. And I agree with what you said. 6 months, a year, dust settles, things move forward. But it is interesting how it will be changing all across the country. Because per state, you can go and do something and you just have no consistency with the process and what's required. So I find that interesting.
Well, and I appreciate, there's always been a barrier to entry to list a home. Mm-hmm. You've had to do a listing consult. You've had to get a listing agreement signed. On the buy side, it really hasn't been for a lot of people. It's like whoever shows up to show them the house gets the deal. And so that's where I think us as a brokerage of full-time professionals, now there's a barrier to entry. If you're doing it the way that you should, there should be a buyer consult. There should be a buyer's agency signed before you look at any properties. And I think for people that don't have their act together, that's going to be tough. And I do think it's better for consumers. I do think these are conversations that agents should have been having. It just forces a little more transparency. So I do think the reason I say it's good for consumers because, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to change. I still think sellers are going to pay the buyer's agent commission the majority of the time. But it just forces agents to have that conversation, have a lot more clarity with the buyer and seller of how this all works. And it's going to be really market dependent, right? Like, right now under 750 here is still a really strong seller's market. So people can offer a lower co-op and still get sold. If you're over that 800-900 mark, people really need to offer co-ops right now. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. But I think the uncertainty of how it's all going to shake out, and then the election, and then interest rates, and all the things, it's a little nerve-wracking this year.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of changes going on. It's interesting for sure. I think it's also interesting because how do you feel like your agents are handling, or how are you preparing them to handle the agents that haven't been in real estate since before 2019? I find that there's a break there between anybody who's been in real estate since 2019 only knows what happened during COVID, which was not reality. We all know.
Yep.
And now it's like, oh, what's going on? It's like, oh, well, this is what's called a normal market.
Yes.
So
yeah.
How is that going for you?
I think, at the end of the year, especially because we have that 10 deal minimum, it's going to kind of shake out who can cut it and who can't.
Interesting.
But I've had a lot of conversations and a lot of trainings. I'm like, you have to be a deal maker. Like 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, like stuff just kind of fell in your lap.
Yep.
That's not the case anymore. And with interest rates, like for me, my sphere group is all move up buyers. It doesn't really make sense for 99% of them to make a move right now. Mm-hmm. So I have to get creative and I'm going to really reach out to any first time home buyers. I'm really reaching out to like my sphere's parents. Mm-hmm. They're all in a place where they probably need to downsize. They haven't sold in 25, 30 years. How do I connect with them and explain the process now and show them all the options? And also just being in flow with your sphere and know what's happening and be a problem solver and have creative conversations. So that's really, I think that's going to differentiate the people that make it, and the people that don't are the people that hustle and the people that can be deal makers and think outside the box and create solutions. I think gone are the days of, just stuff falling in your lap and you're able to sell. And, which I'm kind of excited about, having been in the business as long as I have.
Yep.
I remember when I first got in the business, I feel like 70% of my deals were all the same people. And then in the last 10 years, it's like, there's just so many agents and so many of them that are doing 1 or 2 deals a year. They just don't really know what they're doing. So then you're managing both sides of the transaction. So
I agree. I think, it's funny because there's no doubt that is important. I think it's interesting though, because so many people right now, especially like you were saying, a lot of your agents. So how hard of a line are you going to toe on the 10 deals a year?
So we allow our managing brokers to have discretion there. The marker for me is if I'm seeing growth, like I'm seeing, I have an agent. I fought for her first 2 or 3 years because she was like, her first year she did 4 deals. And then the next year she did 6. But I just knew she would eventually get there. Mm-hmm. This year she, as of today, she'll have already closed 10 million this year. Her goal is 20 million this year. So for me as a managing broker, it's like, do I see growth? Do I see proactive activity? Do I see retention? Do I see that they have a drive and a good why and they want to be here?
Normal stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And then I have, so I would say this year specifically, we're definitely going to give some leeway to managing brokers if they're like, hey, this person is really trying. They've got a good sphere. They'll get there. We're giving discretion for that. But I will say in the managing broker role, sometimes it's nice to have that. If you're like, I just know this person's not going to cut it. I don't necessarily have to be the bad guy. I can just kind of say, Um, so yeah, we always use discretion, but I think typically I know within, sometimes people surprise me, but typically I know within about 6 months if they're ever going to be really successful in this business or not.
Yeah. I would say you could probably do it in way quicker than that, even like 3
Yeah.
months. But you're probably nicer than I am. So
Yeah. Well, it took me, man, it took me years to get to the place of like holding on that 10 deals. And, you know, I'm forever the optimist, which is good
Yeah.
and bad.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
been,
tough.
even with transaction coordinators, like I would hold on to people way too long. That took
Yeah.
me, that was one of the worst skills I had in management, was knowing when it's time to let someone go. And I remember my mentor, once he said to me, which has always stuck with me, is he said, "You're not doing that person any favors keeping them in the wrong seat."
Totally.
And so
That's
then it always
exactly
made me
right.
feel a little bit better about letting people go. Like, go spread your wings somewhere else. This is not
Yes.
it.
That's exactly right. And that is so true. So speaking of that, because I think that's a great point. Obviously, you've had a lot of growth personally as you're on this journey. As an entrepreneur, I mean, there's a lot of people listening to this that are starting to get into real estate or starting a business or have a business, and it might be real estate, maybe not. Investors. What are the lessons you've learned that have helped you be so successful in whether it's investing or running the brokerage, or ones that apply to both? Like, there's a lot that probably that can cross the lines, right? So
Yeah.
what would you say are top 3 skills that help you on a daily basis?
Um, I would say the biggest thing that has taken me time, but I think is so important, is just basically authenticity and trusting your own instincts.
Mm-hmm.
I think that takes some time and some confidence to get there. But every time I ignore that, it usually bites me. So I would say that's a huge skill in being an entrepreneur and running your own business, is that you can have people all around you telling you 10 different things, but at the end of the day, you have to know what's right for you and right for your business. I would say that coupled with that, mindfulness and meditation has always been a big part of my life. I used to teach meditation. Energy work is something that I'm practicing. And so having that groundedness, the time to center, the time to shut out everything else, including the media that's in our industry. So I think having that mindfulness and having that quiet time helps you figure out what your gut feeling is and helps you figure out your guidance. So I think that's super important as well. And then I think also just remembering what's important and remembering why you're even doing this. I think sometimes I have to take a step back and think and just remind myself like how grateful I am for the life that I'm living and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think sometimes it can get bogged down in your goals and hitting your numbers. And, you know, it's end of quarter. We're doing quarterly reviews right now. Like, I think knowing your why, and as a mentor and a coach, like getting people dialed into what their why is. I think for you probably know better as a coach, but I think there's probably a tiny, tiny percentage that the why is money. And so for me, it's like recalibrating and getting clear on what my why is when I feel stressed or miserable or bogged down or overwhelmed. Just kind of going back to why am I doing this? And if there isn't a clear why, then stop doing it, because
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not serving you.
Love that. Yeah, it
So
usually
those are
seems.
probably like the things I try to live by.
No, I think that's great. I heard being grateful. I heard authenticity and trusting yourself, and I heard mindfulness and meditation. So obviously, all 3 of those are important. I always, when I talk to my clients, I talk about first thought when they open their eyes in the morning should be thankful that they're alive another day, right? Thank you for another day. Excited. You get to live another day. You get to do whatever you want for another day. That's a great feeling. I love the trust piece. Talk to me about the mindfulness and meditation. So I always usually would associate that with some sort of, I mean, it can obviously be in the middle of the day, whenever, I'm sure. I
Yeah.
usually talk to my clients about morning routines, getting started powerfully for the day,
Mm-hmm.
maybe middle of the day, taking 10 minutes even just to clear your mind and get focused. And is that kind of what you recommend? Or since this is your expertise, what would you?
Yeah, I think it's what works for you, like when you'll actually do it. And it's funny, for years I was so resistant to any type of routine or schedule because I was like, I'm in real estate because I get to do whatever I want. And the moment I embraced having a schedule, things got way better. I actually had way more freedom. So I do have a morning routine. Obviously, it's not perfect every day, but I do think setting your intention for the day is very important. And then I also coach my agents, if you have a big meeting, if you're meeting with a client or whatever, that something that you're really trying to nail, I think it's also just take 2 minutes in your car, take a couple deep breaths, get clear on what your intention is, visualize nailing it, know that you have the confidence to do it. So I think, and then for me, I also, a huge reason I started meditating to begin with is I could never fall asleep because my brain was so busy. So for me, I'm always meditating at night to kind of clear my brain of the day so that I can sleep and then set my intention for what I want to dream about or what restfulness I want. And the gratitude thing that you were saying with your clients, before I put my feet on the ground when I'm laying in bed, I list 3 unique things that I'm grateful for. And that's been cool. I've had agents over the years that are just like in a bad place and begrudgingly, I'm like, please, every morning, just text me 3 things, 3 unique things that you're grateful for. And every single time it transforms things for them.
Yeah.
So I think people write that off as, being kind of
they
just
write off
woo-woo,
as
but
fluffy
it's
and
so
cheesy
powerful.
and
Yes.
they don't take it seriously. But to that point, in case there's somebody who's like, I think people overcomplicate things, but let's just make this simple for them and say, if I was going to bed and I wanted to meditate or clear my mind so that I could sleep, what are some things that I should be thinking about, or what kind of exercise should I do for a couple minutes that would help me do that? What would you recommend?
So it depends. I know for a lot of people, and I'm in that boat too, I can now, but when I started, I couldn't just like sit in silence. So I would say there are so many. I use the Calm app.
Okay.
There's Insight Timer. There's YouTube. There are so many wonderful guided meditations if you're new to it.
Agreed.
And, start at 5 minutes. Now, I could meditate for an hour and a half and it would feel like 10 minutes. But when I started, so it's just like anything else, right? It takes practice. It's like a muscle. But there's so many guided meditations. If that's not your jam, I think just deep breathing, saying hello to your body, let going of tension throughout your body, sharing your gratitudes of the day, setting your intentions for the next day. All of those things are just very practical as well. Acknowledging any discomfort or pain in your body and trying to release that. I think all of those are really simple and it takes a few minutes, but it changes your whole system. So yeah, I would say either find some guided opportunities or just simply deep breathing, recognizing your body, get in your body.
Yeah.
Shut off your brain. I literally sometimes visualize like old school turning off the TV.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's the kind of stuff that works.
Yes. And it
sounds
simple.
ridiculous, but it's so simple that it works.
Yes. Well, and it's so funny. My dad is like not open. Well, I shouldn't say not open. He's getting better. He's not really open to this stuff. But my sister was talking about being really stressed. And he said, and he had a very stressful job. And but he could always knock out at night. And my sister was saying something about, well, how did you always fall asleep? And he goes, I would just visualize an ocean and watch the waves in and out. And I'm like, Dad, that's meditation. What you were doing. But yeah, it was that simple for him. He would just imagine the ocean and watch the waves come in and out until he fell asleep. Yep. So it can be very simple. It's whatever resonates with you. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a shrine, and you don't have to have candles, and you don't have to, it doesn't have to be.
I've been doing it wrong all this time. Oh, darn.
You can have all those things. That's wonderful, but it can be very simple.
Yeah.
And it can be 5 minutes.
Yeah. No, I think it's great advice. So thinking about the average real estate agent out there, that wants to be where you are, female or male, but wants to have a team and wants to have a brokerage. There are a lot of them out there, and our industry has changed a lot over the last couple of years, right? There's different models. There's so many new types of models coming out there. What would you say to the people who are like, they're scared to grow or scale? They are the ones that need to micromanage everything, or they need to do everything. what's your advice to those people? How do they break out of that cycle and start to grow a team? How do they get
Yeah.
started?
I mean, it's something I'm still really working on. Because one, you have to kind of acknowledge the ego of that I can do it better than anyone else. And give people a try. I mean, I have a transaction coordinator now that's 10,000 times better than I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think getting your ego out of the way, and also recognizing, okay, when am I really valuable? When am I needed? Even with, let's say you just want to grow your real estate business, you hit a certain point where you can't go to every inspection. You can't go to every staging consult. You can't go to every sewer scope or whatever. So part of it is building a team that you trust, building a team. Like I'm working now to really hone in an agent that would show properties the way that I would, so that I feel really confident in letting them show my buyers if I'm not available. So collecting a team that you do trust, and sometimes you just have to, maybe you don't trust them 100%, but you just have to go for it and you can deal with whatever consequences. But yeah, really looking at your day and looking at, okay, where am I actually needed and valuable, and where is it ego? And even, we have an agent who doesn't attend closings.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was like, oh, that's wow. And he goes, but what do we do at closings?
Mm-hmm.
We just sit there and BS. There's no real need for us to be there. And he said, and your clients, most people are doing this once every 5 to 10 years. They don't have an expectation if you're going to be there or not. So also opening your mind of like, okay, I really like going to closing, so I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's things that you don't need to be at and you don't enjoy, don't do it. And then I think as far as the fears of growing or the fears of making a change, really looking at, okay, what am I scared of? And then questioning, is that true? Like, is that even true? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it like 100% true? Like, is that the only way it's going to go? And then also flip it. Okay. Well, what if everything goes fantastic? What would that look like? I think just sometimes questioning the stories that we're telling ourselves is really, really powerful.
I agree.
And then going back to, what's your intention? Like, why are you, I've seen people come in as managing brokers and they last like 9 months because they were in it more for the title or perceived growth or they just weren't in it for the right reasons. And truthfully, you make a lot more as a top producer than as a manager. So you really have to want to be in it to help people grow and be a part of the bigger picture. So I think also, if you are thinking about growing, get clear on why you want to and make sure it's the right reasons and that it's really aligned with your long-term goals.
I think that's good advice. I think a lot of us have limiting beliefs and we don't realize they're limiting beliefs. And so we hold ourselves back, whether, whatever the reason. There's some common ones I talked about on my podcast in the past, but I think that's great advice. I always talk to my clients about 3 places that they need to always focus: automation, elimination, and delegation. And I'm like, you need to figure out, like, can you do one of those 3 at all times? And that is a huge help for them usually. But I find that most people just can't give up. They just can't give the work up. They don't want to delegate, and then they just can't get past that point. And then after that, it usually seems to be someone who gives it up, but then they have to micromanage. And so there's like those 3 levels they have to get past. So did you find that was an issue for you when you started delegating, that you were micromanaging, or was it once you conquered the delegation phase, was it like, I'm past it?
No, I mean, I'm still in it. I just hired
You're like, I haven't delegated anything yet. I don't know.
I hired a virtual assistant 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm not giving her enough to do. And it's fear. It's, I can do it better. It's honestly, my personal business is pretty slow right now. So I have the time to do it, but I'm also like, I have the time to train her to do it. So when I get slammed, she can do it. Yeah, no, I definitely haven't conquered it. It's still like, it's been a journey. And it is having people like you as a coach or just other colleagues around you to kind of push and question, like, okay, why haven't you handed that off? Why are you still doing that? And again, just getting clear and like, what are your long-term goals? And is this activity aligned in that? And, I've hustled for 20 years. Like, if I don't want to work as much, I should do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's honestly something I've been working a lot in the last couple of years, is some worthiness stuff around like feeling like I always have to be driving so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so taking a step back and appreciating what I've built and now enjoying it. Um, it's the old adage, like nobody on their deathbed looks back and is like, oh, I wish I'd worked more.
Absolutely. It's
So
it's a tough balance. As an entrepreneur, it's a tough balance, right? And I think everybody thinks that day is going to come where they just hit this breakthrough point where it's like vacations all the time. And it's like, that doesn't happen. That's not reality. You have to make it. You have to schedule it and take the time to take care of yourself. If you're not full, then you can't take care of anybody else. You have no team to do business.
yeah. I mean, and the great thing is I do really love what I do.
Yeah.
90% of the time I'm really happy in what I'm doing. And so that's part of it. I think that's hard for, I have people in my life that don't love their jobs. And so I think it's hard for, they're like, God, you just work all the time. And I'm like, but it's work and play. Like when you're excited about what you're doing and what you're building, it doesn't feel like the same. So that's a piece too that I feel really fortunate. And I recognize that. I mean, I don't know what percentage of people actually really love what they're doing, but I think it's fairly small. But no, that is an ongoing journey. And I admire people that are able to, I forget, you probably know, whatever if the 80% rule, like if someone can do something 80% as well as you can, just let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have 80, a really 20. Hard time of letting go of that 20%.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's definitely an ongoing internal battle for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. I mean, it's, I would say that's probably one of the most common setbacks that I find with people in general.
When you get stuck, I mean, there's only so much you can do.
That's right.
So then where do you go?
It.
You're just, you're capped out.
That's exactly right.
And that's where I think that's what's finally pushing me now is I'm like, I don't want to be capped out.
Yeah.
And I want to evolve. I don't want to do the same things I was doing, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So, perfect segue. What's the future hold for you?
That's a great question. I mean, the podcasting is fairly new to me. And I've had a really great time with it. I'd mentioned to you before we started, I have a close friend that's a social media consultant, and she was like, you should start a podcast. And I was like, well, what do I have to say that nobody else has already said? And so I haven't gone that route yet, but I'm still thinking about it. But I appreciated that she was like, you don't hear a lot of females talking about investing. And she's like, as a female, I would want to learn from you. You make it seem a little more attainable, not so intimidating. So that motivated me. So we'll see what happens. This has been it's been a challenge. It's been something new. It's been fun. I've also started teaching for our brokerage. So I've done a lot of NAR classes. And that's actually turned out to be really fun. So I am leaning more towards the mentoring, managing, teaching than the production piece. So I don't know if it, I would say probably in the next 10 years, I might stop working with clients. And then development wise, I bought 18 acres down in a town called Sedalia, which is just south of me. It's a fairly rural community, but a lot is changing. So it's been good and bad. I've had like 3 concept meetings with the county and they don't want anything to change. So, but that will be my next project for sure. Like what I want to do with that property. And so that's been fun as well. And then hopefully, I don't know at what point I'll really want to slow down. But I'm in a fairly new relationship and I've been single for a long time. But we've been together 8 months now and it's getting very serious and he's very good for me. Like I watched 2 sunsets last week. I couldn't tell you.
Wow.
The last time I watched a sunset.
Right. Yeah. So make everybody feel guilty. Okay.
Yeah. But he's been really good for me. Of one, it's the first relationship I've ever been in where I didn't feel like I had to shrink to like make them feel okay. Mm-hmm. So that's been huge. But then also he's really encouraging me to just slow down and like enjoy the fruits of my labor. And so I think that will probably continue to shift my goals and what life looks like as well. So, which is good. It feels like an evolution. Like I'm in a different chapter.
That's a tough thing, especially for people that are driven, like that'll be listening to this or us, you always feel like, at least I feel like I'm always running out of time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. I got to do that. And I constantly feel guilty because I could have done more. And it's just that constant feeling, right? That you're driving. but you have to stop. And the good news is I have an 8-year-old, and that forces me to do it. And I enjoy that. So I make myself, and it's easy to
Yeah.
do because I love spending time with him and my family, but it's tough. It's definitely something that, you have to take time and understand why it goes back to that why.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Well, so I can enjoy some parts of my life. And so if you're not doing that, then you forget why you're even on this road.
Well, and I just over the holidays, he was so great. I do love entertaining, which is, I think, partly has helped my business tremendously because when people are in your home, it's like a whole different relationship. But, I was planning a big holiday party for my team, and I was planning a holiday party for friends and a holiday party for clients. And I called him just in a rage of like all this stuff and how overwhelmed and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, honey, why don't you like take a minute to think about how lucky you are that you can even throw all these parties and that you have so many great people in your life to spend the holidays with. And like, he's just so like, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That totally takes my like Costco trip out of the equation.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
He's really good at reminding me like not everybody even is capable of that. And not everybody has someone to spend the holidays with. And not everybody, like, it just was a really good, like, bring me back to reality of what's important in life.
I love that. That's very true though. And we all need someone like that if we're not good at it ourselves. Sometimes it takes somebody else to be like, hey, time out. This is amazing what you've got going on. You need to be, again, being thankful and grateful. So
yeah,
that's exciting though. I think you have a lot of great things going on, and I know you'll have a bright future ahead of you, but this is exciting. I'm excited for you. So you've been successful so much so far. So to see what you're going to do from here on out would be amazing.
Yeah, it just continues.
Yeah, it will. Look, as long this is, it's the work ethic. So you're in good shape. So I know you're not going to slow down anytime soon. So, well, this is awesome. Where do you want people to find you? Where can they find you? What's the best place for them to find you if you'd like them to?
Yeah, so I would say I'm probably most active on Instagram. So that's Amy Terry 8Z Realtor. And then from there, I have a link tree. So you can schedule an appointment. You can check out my website, all kinds of stuff on there. If you don't use Instagram, just old school email. I check my email still. So it's amyterry@8z.com. You can reach me as well.
Cool. Well, if anybody has any questions for her, please reach out. We'll put your links as well and anything that you mentioned in the notes below. And I appreciate everyone listening to another episode. And we'll catch everybody next time on Focused Free Fit. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.